Wondering what the F has happened to your body and your life? You're in the right place, my friend. Welcome to Season 3 of Transforming 45, where we dive into the incredible stories of how brilliant humans are navigating the midlife squeeze with courage, passion, and a healthy dose of humor. Don't miss out on any of our heart-led episodes. Hit the subscribe button, leave a 5-star review, and if you're inspired, share an episode you love with a friend. It means more to me than I can express that you're choosing to spend time here and sharing our message of midlife revolution. So let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Transforming 45. This week, I am really excited to welcome Noemi Beres, and she is the co-owner of the Podcast Connections podcast booking agency. She helps entrepreneurs and business owners enrich their lives through connections, sharing their knowledge, and connecting them to quality podcast shows. In addition, Noemi is dedicated to helping experts grow their businesses with interviews. She started working in online marketing in 2007. Noemi has a master's degree in Danish literature and language, and she is a linguist, content creator, and master organizer. Noemi, I'm so glad you're here today. Obviously, we are both podcast lovers, and we have a number of other intersections as well. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So welcome. I'm glad you're here today.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, Noemi, tell me, who are you and how did life introduce you to this version?
That's a brilliant question. I never had that question before, and I really had to think about it. So when I was thinking about the reply, I think I'm still that 16-year-old who deep down in my core, who left Hungary and became an exchange student in Denmark and fell in love with a different country, a different culture, a different language. And although I'm 45, so your podcast is the perfect timing for my age. I just turned 45 last year. We go through so many changes in our lives, and we have those stages. But deep down in our core, I'm still that, 16 years old who just wanted to explore the world and who had a craving for life and learning and love. And I'm still the same person, although with probably a few, silver streaks in my hair. But deep down in my core, I still feel that little girl with more self-confidence, with more self-esteem than I was. And thanks to that, I can, thank my family and especially my parents, my mom and dad, who really supported me and helped me to become who I am today, and who supported all my crazy ventures into the world. And I think all the different cultures and different environments I lived in the past 20 something years that really formed me to be the person who I am today. And I don't like labels, but I just like just to stay true to myself and who I was, and never forget where I come from in the small town, in the middle of nowhere from Hungary, and just remember that, in all my life.
Yeah. What do you think it was in that 16-year-old girl that called you out into the world?
I knew deep down that I don't belong there. I was kind of an outsider in all my life. And I wanted to do something, I'm not saying bigger or better, but something different than the people who lived there and my classmates. And, so for me, it was no question, even at age 5, that I want to go to explore the world. And I'm an only child, and my parents knew it, that this is not the place for me. And when the opportunity came when I was 16 to become an exchange student, they wholeheartedly supported my goal to discover myself and to become a different person. Because that was a whole year when I spent in Denmark with a Danish family in a Danish school. And that was ages ago, many, many moons ago. But it really helped to form me to become the person who I am today. Because you really grow up when you have to spend a whole year without your family. And that was Zoom, pre-mobile phone time. So we sent letters. We used to send letters or go to the post office with your stamp and everything. It was a different world, but it helped me to become the person I wanted to be.
Yeah, it really was a different time. I would go to work at a summer camp every summer, starting when I was 16 as well. So I also had that urge to be out in different places, also from a small town. And it was such an insular. It was a very insular experience, because when you left home, you're right, it was just letters. And there wasn't, especially like in a camp community,
Mm.
aside from listening to the radio, that was the only exposure we had to whatever was happening in the outside world. Even one summer, in 1994, tornado actually went through the
Oh,
camp where I was. And so we had to race down into the ravine, and we were at, it's a story for another time. However, I called my parents that evening to say, just so you know, I'm okay. And they were like, what are you talking about? So they didn't even know this extreme event that had happened until I reached out and told them about what happened. And I think it's interesting to sort of, it's a thought experiment because we can't really know about the difference that is happening between kids growing up now who are always connected
yeah,
to everything and everyone all the time, to our generation and generations before who had more of that separation. There was that like space where we really were on our own, right? Like going from Hungary to Denmark, that would have been a massive transition in your life,
yeah.
and not having all of that kind of connection to support you through it.
Absolutely. Yeah, your first time I sat on a plane and age 16, everything was so, so different. But then you just fell in love with this whole new lifestyle and it never stops. Yeah, even at age, in your 40s.
Yeah, absolutely. So after your year in Denmark, did you go back to Hungary?
Yes, I had to because I had to finish high school. So I finished high school, which was horrible because I went back to my same class and everything was the same apart from me. And nobody really recognized me. I mean, literally, they didn't recognize me because I had like very short hair with nose ring and everything. So I changed out inside and outside, and nobody they just looked at me. Who are you? What did they do to you? And but it was for the good. And then I went to university. Obviously I wanted to learn Danish language and linguistics, and my dad was like, so why doesn't she want to be a doctor or or a lawyer or something? Was like, no, dad, I'm a Scorpio, so I'm just doing my own thing here.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and I became a Danish linguist, but nobody really wanted to hire me for anything in Hungary apart from making photocopies and making coffee in different places.
Aw.
So I told my husband, let's discover the world. I was already married, and so I got a job in Ireland, and that's how I ended up there in a call center, which was an interesting journey. There's so many other European young people with different university degrees, because Irish people, they don't really speak different languages, so they needed the European workforce. So I stayed there for 3 years. But because I have to emphasize I'm a Scorpio, I couldn't stay much longer. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't know like what that involves to be an entrepreneur. But that was back in 2007, in my late 20s. I just want to be an entrepreneur. Let's do something. So that was when we started our first business, our first online travel related business in 2007.
I want to put a pin in that for a second because I want to come back to that. But I
Right.
want to go back to something you said about that when you returned home, that nothing around you had changed, but you had changed.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you're noticing that sort of in this midlife transition as well, because when you said that, it really resonated something for me of,
Mm.
oh, yeah, like in all of the midlife transitions I'm experiencing, moving and children leaving and death and all of the and perimenopause.
Yes, that too.
Right. All of these things are happening. I am different, but well, in my case, my whole life context is different now. However, before that, and for many women, as we travel this perimenopause midlife journey, everything inside of us is changing, just like when we were a teenager. At this stage, however, we have a life that we have built around us of responsibilities and support and all of the things. So we are changing, but we're bumping up against the limits sort of what we have created around us, which makes it a little more complex, I think, than when we are teenagers. And I don't like it's the first time I've really thought about it in that way. So
Mm.
thank you for that. And I'm not sure it's something that we talk about a lot. And I'm wondering if you've had sort of similar experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. You're so right. For me, it happened when before I turned 40, because in 2019, my dad passed away because of cancer. and he was diagnosed back in 2017, and he passed away in May on my son's birthday in 2019. And that was a big change. Then I lost my grandmother to an accident a few months later. So basically, I'm an only child. So basically, I got my mom's left in my family, and that was it. And then COVID happened. And so I lost my business too. And that was a lot of things happening. Plus, I started to change. And I don't know, it's because of everything, started to change around me, all the death, the grief. And so it was a very traumatic time of my life. But they say that like there's always good things and bad things. So that's what happened, because that's how this business was born. And I'm also an artist, and being an artist really helped me to cope with trauma, stress, anxiety caused by all the death and grief in the family. So yes, I agree with you 100%. It's a very, very similar change that we go through in our life when we are teens, but it has a bigger impact, I guess, because there are too many things involved. Your wife, your mother, your daughter. So you really have to support people and be there for other people too. And for me, the biggest change is just to learn to love myself, because I felt that I just didn't have time to do that, because I was always busy with something, creating a new business, looking after my dad, looking after my mom. And after I turned 40, I decided it's like, this has to change, because, I have to be in love with myself to give love to other people.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think so many of the things that you just said really resonated. I'm also an only child, so I hear you in, in all of those things. And in my context now, so my mom died in 2007. So I am now parentless,
Yeah.
which is a kind of level, it's a different kind of grief. I
Yeah.
found then like losing one parent is really challenging, but when suddenly you are the only person left from your family of origin, it's a different experience. And there's grief of not only the people, but of that experience and of how you came into the world. Is all of that support
Yeah.
has vanished, and people who knew your story, right? Like the people who knew my story from how I entered to this world, there's no one here anymore who knows that part of that story. So that grief is something that is different to
Yeah.
work through. And when we're teenagers and we're going through this sort of transition and change and figuring ourselves out, it's expected,
Yes.
because that's part and parcel of that stage of development. So everyone who is around you and culture and society expects that of you.
Yeah, you're a horrible teenager or whatever. Everything is happening and for a reason. But yeah, you're right. I mean, your 40s, it just happens. Things happen, and you have to cope with it basically, because there's no other choice, and there's
Yeah.
so many responsibilities. Yeah.
Yes. And yeah, so our culture doesn't have that same narrative at this stage of transition. And so I think that that is part of why podcasting and having these conversations is so important, because we can start to build the narrative of, so this is what to expect also at this stage. And this is what it might look like in this context and in this context, because it is going to be different for all of us. But to know that yeah, we all actually are going through this kind of massive shakeup, both physically in our bodies and in our life context. And just being able to say, like, I see you. I see you.
Mm.
This is hard and it's challenging. There's also really amazing things about it. Just like when we were teenagers, it was hard and it was
Yeah.
challenging, but there also were really amazing things about it. And so to be able to make space for us to have all of those experiences is so important.
Yeah, and also to realize that you're not alone, because once but hear these stories people share on podcasts and different platforms, you know that no, you're not alone with this problem, and this is not unique. Everybody go through in different ways. We all have different stories, but we can align with those stories, and they can help us to basically digest and just to think about like, yes, there are other people out there in the world who have the same problem like me.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I wanna travel back in time again to 2007.
Let's do that. Time travel.
Yeah. So 2007, that seems like a really to me, maybe I am wrong about it, but that seems like a really early time to get into sort of digital marketing. Was it so there was some pioneering there for you?
Kind of, yes, you are absolutely right, because we started an online travel related business, and that we were the first car hire brokers in Hungary, which meant we were like a middleman between the car hire company and the client. And they were mostly Hungarian clients who travel abroad or went back to Hungary, who lived abroad, and they wanted to hire a car basically. And that's what was our business about. And we were the first one who did that in Hungary. So it was really interesting. And we got on this wagon of online marketing and online world very, very early. And it was such a different world back then, so much easier to get on, on the first page of Google and everything. So I was basically a travel writer, blogger, online marketing. I wouldn't say expert, but like I knew a lot about it and I learned a lot about it. So it was a very, very interesting time, so different than what I do right now.
Mm,
But I learned a lot and I can use that knowledge this life.
right. Yeah. What did happened in between? So was it COVID where that business started to shift and change, or were there more transitions in between that chapter and the one that you're in now?
And mostly it's because of the pandemic, because, it's purely 100% travel related. So people just stopped basically traveling and they stopped hiring cars. And that was it. So one day to another, everything stopped. And we were told that like, yeah, it's only 2 weeks and everything is going back to normal. And nobody thought that like, okay, there's going to be 2 years or even longer.
Uh-huh.
So we had to figure out just basically to pay the bills, to pay our son's tuition and everything else, just to live, to start something. And luckily we had a mentor, an Irish gentleman who had a business. Basically, he helped people to start podcast booking agencies, how to start a podcast booking agency. And to be honest with you, Lisa, I knew nothing about podcasts. I never listened to podcasts before 2020, nothing at all. And so when my husband came up with this idea, it's like, okay, let's do something and let's do this podcast booking agency thing. And I was just like, yeah, okay, do it. Let's do it. Like we put together a website during the night, and next day, okay, we are podcast booking agents. We did a course on like how to do basic stuff, but we learned as we went along the way. And it was a very interesting learning curve for sure. But I love challenges, and I never looked back. And I never looked back when became an entrepreneur in my late 20s. And I never looked back when we did this, because I knew, and this has to be done. And I don't know, I have that kind of personality that like, I try to see the positive in things. And I just wanted to, if you are, I think in life, if you are persistent and consistent with things, you can achieve it. And once you have that kind of mentality, and nothing can stop me. So it was like, yeah, let's do it. I mean, what can go wrong? I mean, we won't get clients and then we start something new or something else, but it worked out.
Yeah, that's incredible to be able to make that kind of, I hate using the word pivot at this time, but to
Yeah.
make that kind of pivot and shift and change, and just the leap of faith that it
Yeah,
takes
absolutely.
to be able to engage in that. And so obviously as a podcaster, I'm interested in hearing what are the sort of the trends that you have noticed over that time in the podcast world?
It was really, really interesting. And that's a great question, because when we started, everybody started a podcast in 2020. Everybody was bored at home. They had something to say. So what was the best way? Let's start a podcast. It's a new platform and you can do it from anywhere. You just start to record basically your conversations with people you like or trust, or you met, and everybody started the podcast. So I think that was a good timing for us to get in the business. But it changed because, as I said, like in my case as well, I think in any kind of business you are in, you need to be consistent, you need to be persistent, and you need to put in the work. And when people realize after 6 episodes, that's the magic number, 6 episodes, that, oh my gosh, this is hard work. I mean, you really have to record those episodes, edit those episodes, we schedule times. This is a lot of work. I'm not ready to do that. So many podcasts stopped operating, and we saw that trend. And the next phase came, or next wave came, when people went back to work, when COVID not disappeared, but like eased, and people went back to work. And then there was a bit of down time for podcasts, but it's still going very, very strong, I have to say. And I think it will be around for a very long time, because this is a long-term marketing strategy. And it's people realize that you create evergreen content. It's very good for your SEO, for your website. It's a brilliant opportunity to build your brand, to build your authority. So people are just keep doing it. And it doesn't matter if there's COVID or not, and they are at home or not. And they are, what I can see now, more and more people are doing live interviews as well, live podcast interviews. That's a new trend, what I've noticed. But obviously, because of the huge distances, for example, the US, because we work mainly with US clients, not everybody can travel and do that. So the online version, the online podcast interviews will be around, I think, for a very, very long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I do both. I've had live guests with me or
Yeah.
I've done also, I'm doing it digitally right now because you
Yeah.
are coming to us from Cyprus. So as much as I would love to be there right now, yeah, there is a different energy when you
Mm.
have a live human with you. It is a little bit more, I don't know, the energy just is different,
Yes.
but it's just different. It's not better. I actually like both forms equally well, just for different reasons.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I never experienced the live version because
Mm,
I'm in Europe, so I don't have that opportunity to go live with anyone here. But I don't know, the energy just oozes through Zoom as well. So you really feel if you have that vibe with the host or if you don't have it. I think it's doesn't really matter. You still feel it. It's still there or
mhm.
not.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm also curious on your end if you are seeing what are the topics like for me, and part of it is I recognize the world that I live in is menopause, perimenopause, and midlife. But are you also seeing that there sort of is a trend toward a greater amount of content being developed in that area?
Oh my gosh. You mean your topic or your niche or
Yeah.
definitely. I mean, this is an upcoming topic that everything that about women's life, female empowerment, females' health. This is a very, very strong niche, which is really, really popular now. And I know that men are a little bit jealous of us because they don't really have that option. So because they don't like talk openly so much about their problems and troubles, because they do have that too. But I think female guests we are just more open and more vulnerable when it comes to share this message. But I'm glad to see there are people and there are men out there too who share their experiences, their midlife crisis or midlife. I don't like the midlife, but like we all have midlife crisis. Everyone has it, and they open up
Mhm.
more and more. But I think the female version and this niche is going strong. And we talk about so many things more openly than we never did before. Like nobody talked about menopause or nobody talked about menstruation like one of my podcast host friends does. And she started a podcast about that. So it's amazing. And yeah, and how, like, for example, I had clients and they talked about the connection between like how to deal with money when you are a woman and a wife, because sometimes you're in the dark when it comes to money matters. So it's really interesting, and we can learn just so much from it since this whole new world opened up for women. So I think this is just so important because we learn so much every day, even if you're a guest or if you're a host, it doesn't really matter. Both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I do both. Love
Yeah.
guesting on other people's shows. That's really fun because you get to release all of the hosting responsibility, right? You just get to
Yes.
share whatever that conversation is pulling from you. And I always say one of the great benefits of this is it's like a free therapy session
Yes,
every
true.
time I
Yeah.
record.
It's very interesting because there were things I never shared with many of my friends or online or any other place. But I get on a podcast and I talk about I'm not talking about deepest, darkest secrets, but part of it. And it's
Yeah.
really interesting that we can just so easily open up. Yeah, it's very fascinating.
It is a fascinating study in humans and how much we really true. I mean, we know this, all of the research shows we are wired for connection,
Yes.
but just how easy it is when there is a platform for two people who, we met briefly many months
Yeah.
ago. to be able to just connect in a way across the world and share our human experiences in a way that hopefully draws other humans in so that they see themselves and hear their stories reflected and know, like you said at the beginning, that we're not alone. We really are a community just trying to figure out what this strange ride on planet Earth is all about.
Yes, so true.
And one of the things I wonder about is our responsibility, because there is no governing agency, right, over podcasts, which means there's great amount of freedom. And so where do we find our responsibility in terms of helping to truth?
Mhm.
And I know it's complicated, right? It's a very complicated because everyone's truth is a little bit different.
Yeah.
But what is our role in creating good quality content that is not intentionally grounded in misinformation?
That's a brilliant question, and nobody asked me that before. I think the most important thing is once we, for example, we research for platforms to share our knowledge or share our stories, that let's do our research, because we don't want to end up on podcast that represents something completely different that we want to align with. And there are so many podcasts out there, and yeah, like kind of misinformation or very weird things about the world and about femininity or about connection. So I don't want to name any of those, but I heard about them. Obviously, we don't work with them, and we have to really pick the right ones for us. So that involves a lot of research and listen to a couple of episodes, because once you've done an interview and it goes live, your name will stick to that podcast, and you will basically, it's an evergreen content. So people, whenever they search for your name, you will come up and you will be associated with that podcast. So we have to be careful what you represent and what that podcast represents. It's because there are a lot of interesting things out there, and you have to be careful who to be associated with.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And in this time, especially, the our world context is just getting more and more complicated as we
Yeah.
move into 2025 on all different levels. I think it's really important to get really clear. And this again comes back to that midlife sort of transition of getting really clear about what it is that really matters to us at this point, and what is our legacy? What do we really want our legacy to be? And do we want that legacy to be one of division and pain and hate, or do we want it to be one that brought this world to a better place, or at least to a place where it felt safe and soft and that you felt seen in real ways? And that's for sure one of the things I am thinking about. I mean, I always have
Yeah.
since the beginning of this show, but even more intentionally being really conscious about what the words are that are going out into the world from this show and what the impact of that is.
So true. And just trying to, be understanding and send love to people, and just to listen to people. And because sometimes I think that's the most important things, for example, when it comes to podcasting, to listen, to be able to listen to each other and to learn from each other, to willing to listen and to willing to learn. I think these are key elements when it comes to whatever conversation we're having, even if it's a podcast interview or just a conversation between two people and friends or family members, to listen and to be heard. Because if you don't have that, yeah, there's division and there's chaos in the world.
Yeah. And again, it sort of goes back to what you were saying at the beginning of the interview about being that 16-year-old girl, right? And it's interesting because that's the age that I most closely associate as well, my 16-year-old self, what her energy and expectation and thoughts were about what my future, about what her future was going to be. And we all go through trauma on this planet. It's
Yep.
impossible not to, right? Whether it is vicarious trauma, whether it is our own experiences. And so that can sort of shift and change our narrative and our story and our trajectory. But if we go back to whatever stage it was that you can relate to, where you really felt the most like yourself, whatever age that was. I know for some people it's like very young, for some people it's much older. But what was it about you at that stage that really made you feel like yourself and felt like you belonged somewhere on this earth and in that planet? And what was that feeling and that resonance? And how do we bring that through all of the trauma and the hard stuff so that we can stay true to that emotion, that intention that we had at that stage?
Wow, this is a very complex question. I love it. I love it. Yes, for me, the time when I realized this and I felt really aligned with myself, I think was the time when I became part of kind of the artist community here in Cyprus. And that was before COVID. Everything happened, be like after Christ and before Christ. So it's like before COVID, after COVID
Yes,
time. And
absolutely.
I just really felt at home with these people. I was so lucky that I could represent Cyprus, interestingly, because I'm not even a Cypriot, but I represented Cyprus in an international artist community get together in Bulgaria. And so I traveled there and I met like-minded people, like-minded artists there. So it was just a phenomenal experience to see it. It's like, oh my gosh, they get me. And just like this. And because sometimes you feel like that, like nobody understands me on this planet. And where's my tribe? And I really found my tribe there in the artist community. And because I love creativity since I was, 16 or whatever, like even earlier stage, like, 10, 12, whatever. So I really felt at home and at peace with these people because I just felt they could understand me. And that was the first time that I found my tribe and I just really felt like myself. And I have another experience when, it was about 3 years ago, and I found my second tribe, and that's a different community because I would call it like a business community. It's the Go-Giver community led by Bob Berg, and who I'm just lucky to call my friend and mentor. When, I read his book when I became an entrepreneur in 2007 and The Go-Giver by John David Mann and Bob Berg. And I just got it as a gift from an American marketing company that I don't even remember what they did or because it just wasn't a big deal. But they left this book on the top of this package that we got back in Ireland. And that was The Go-Giver. And I decided that I want to be a member of this community, but procrastination, so it didn't happen until 3 years ago. And then I became a member of this community and I found my second tribe. I kind of lost my artist tribe, but I found my second real tribe, and that's the Go-Giver community. And I just love the people. They're kind of my second family across the pond.
Mhm.
And it's a fascinating feeling that like I can really true to myself and be myself with them because they represent the same values that I do in life and business. And that's how I lead life and business as well. And yeah, it's amazing, right? Because we all need a tribe.
Absolutely. Community is so important always. And
Yeah.
as we move into these again sort of tumultuous waters in life, having community who again sees us, hears us and is able to support us through that time is so important. I totally agree with you. And so, for people who are listening who feel like they have a story that they maybe want to share, what do you, when you're working with someone who's maybe never been a podcast guest before, or who just is sort of testing the waters and is even wondering, like, well, does anybody care about my story? What are some of the ways that you work with people to encourage them to let them know, like, yes, your story matters?
Yes, and you're right. Your story matters all the time because we all have a story. Because some people say like, "Oh no, I don't have a story. I'm too shy. I don't have anything to share with the world." Yes, you do. We all do. That's why we basically have a strategy call with our clients. And we can call it a coaching session. Maybe not the best word, but when we especially I love working with people who are starting out and they're not like 100% like podcast guesting pros. I love working with newbies who's just starting out and help them to become better guests. We go through their bios, their topics, their talking points, their life, their story. And if they don't have a story, we help them to shape that story into a form that you can maybe a condensed version of your story that you can share on podcasts. And I think it's really important. And I just love it because you really earn the trust from people when you walk with them on this path, on this journey. It's really interesting to see that they don't want to open up, they're quite shy, but by the end, after a few interviews, they doing marvelously. And what I noticed is there are many people, like they are in the elderly people, maybe over 60, 70, and they just starting out podcast guesting and they're doing brilliantly. And I love working with them because they have so much knowledge, they have so much experience to share with people. And my mom used to say that, most of the world, they don't care with kids and older people because yeah, they are not so useful for whatever in the other ages. And I think that's such a bad misconception, because we can learn so much from kids, and we can learn so much from the older generation as well. So I love working with them, and it's just it's an amazing feeling when you see them just thriving in the podcast guesting world, and they're getting great feedbacks, and they are so appreciative when whatever they get. And I think they trust you easier than younger generation. They don't question you. It's really interesting. It's a very interesting vibe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. I think it's so important to make sure that the full spectrum of lived reality is represented because absolutely, like when I think about actually talking about this, I'm like, it would be really interesting to do an episode with my grandmother who is
Mm,
94. Because when you think about just what they like, the mass amount of change they have
yes.
experienced in their lifetime, like when my grandmother was born, I don't think they had indoor plumbing, right? Like up to now, where she's still like she is a whiz on her iPhone. She shops online and she texts me and
Love
she
it.
like, does all the things. And I just thought how fascinating to have
Mm.
lived through all of that and to what perspective it gives us who are in this moment now about just what it is to like one step, one foot in front of the other, because this is a story that continues.
So true. Yeah, I love those stories. And when I think about unfortunately they're not alive anymore, my grandparents, but they had so much to share. And I know so many things from my mother because she shared so much with me about their life. And I asked her to write a book about it, not book, but just like a book to me, so I can remember all these stories because they survived World War I, World War II. And yes, you said no indoor plumbing. And plus, we lived in a place that was just so different from the US or Canada or different parts of the world, that it was, Central Europe, Eastern Europe, and people were poor and they had farms. So it was such a huge difference between the life they lived and the life we're living now. So they have a vast amount of experience and interesting memories to share with the world. They shouldn't be
Yeah.
forgotten.
Yeah, no, absolutely, because it's an important part of our human story, right? It's
Yeah.
all of our stories together that are moving us through this time and this space. And what is for people who are working with you, for people who are coming out and sharing their stories and becoming podcast guests, what is the thing that they reflect on that they one have developed in themselves or that they feel they are receiving? Like what is the meaning? What is the meaning for people when they become a podcast guest? What's the shift they experience?
It's really interesting because it's different from people to people. There are people that they just want to launch a book and they want to get, their book promoted on shows. But there are other people who really want to share their stories and help other people, maybe in the mental health journey, because that's their quest, their goal, to help people to maybe not to commit suicide, because if you can just save one person's life, that's a win. So it really depends on the person, what kind of goal and focus they have. Maybe they just have purely business focus because they want to sell more books, or they want to, sell basically their coaching service. But there are other people who really want to help the world and change the world to a better place. So it really depends on the person. And of
Mhm.
course, I mean, I appreciate everyone because, yeah, we have our different lives and different goals. But for me and for other people, what I can see that if we can change one person's life with things that we share and being open and vulnerable, they can align with our message, they can align with our story, and it might change their lives. I mean, it's just so important.
Yeah, absolutely. So for listeners, know that your story is matters, that someone needs to hear it. And
Yes.
if you decide that you want to share that in a more public way, all of the contact information for Noemi and her organization will be in the show notes. I know it might feel like something that's totally outside of your comfort zone, but even just giving it a go one time, it is a real process. It's a gift that you give not only to the listeners, but also to yourself. So just for people who are listening, maybe it just becomes a seed that you think about for a little while. And if it's something that you've always wanted to do, reach out to Noemi and she can help get you connected with shows and help you develop your story. So Noemi, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate your time and your wisdom, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Likewise, and thank you for this great conversation, Lisa.
Hey everyone. Thanks for joining me on this week's episode of Transforming 45. I hope you feel inspired, empowered, and ready to embrace every facet of your midlife journey. If you enjoyed our conversation, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. These actions make a world of difference in growing our podcast community. Your support helps us reach much more amazing listeners just like you. And don't forget, please share an episode you love with a friend or with your community. Sharing our stories is what helps our community grow. Keep shining your midlife magic, and I'll catch you next week.
Electricast.